Chicago will announce an interim operational capability for NATO's missile defense system that, in fact, and this fits in the first phase of the American phased adaptive approach for Europe, actually was implemented last year. So there are now American warships in the European area that have some capability to defend against short and medium range missiles. There's now an American radar up and running in Turkey that looks towards Iran. And NATO's made some progress in terms of hooking these pieces together under a command and control system. So that'll be one of the headlines that comes out of Chicago. But I also think that you'll see NATO leaders reiterating in a message that will be directed very much at Mr. Putin, the alliance's desire to find a cooperative arrangement, even if they have to wait until after the American election. Putin, he wants to know who's going to be in the White House in 2013. He wants to see how the American election plays out, because his calculation likely is that if it's President Romney, there will be a different American approach to missile defense than would be the case under President Obama if he's reelected. So the Russians, I think, are in something of a waiting game.
Is that fair? I mean, is that smart for them to do? Is it smart for all of us that they do this?
Well, I think the unfortunate thing is, you know, it sets back the time when you could actually engage in real missile defense cooperation, and actually at the technical level between Pentagon experts and Russian Ministry of Defense experts, they've actually found a lot of convergence in terms of what missile defense cooperation might look like. Transparency, joint exercises, a jointly manned data fusion center where you would take Russian data from their satellites and their radars and American data from, and you'd combine them in a jointly manned NATO-Russia center to generate a common operational picture about what's going on in the Middle East. And that would be of value to the United States and NATO. For example, there are a couple of Russian radars that actually would detect a launch coming out of Iran earlier than any American radars. But those sorts of discussions on practical cooperation are on hold due to this bigger political obstacle. Again, I don't think that it's going to be lifted between now and the American election. The Russians, I think, have several concerns about missile defense. One is there is a genuine worry. There's a lot of respect for American technology. And they do have a fair point, which if missile defense expands, at some point it could in fact undermine the strategic balance between the United States and Russia. But I think when you look at American plans looking at over the next 10 years, those plans should not be a problem. But the Russians may be asking what comes next. There's a second part of the American missile defense program that the Russians don't like, is that the plans for Europe over the next 8 years entail deploying a small number of American missile interceptors in Romania and Poland. And as a matter of principle, the Russians remain unhappy about NATO enlargement. They don't like the idea of NATO or American military infrastructure going into the territory of countries that joined since 1999. Both the United States and NATO have been trying to push that theme, is that they would really like to find a way to cooperate with Russia. And there are a couple of reasons. First of all, if you can get this cooperative missile defense arrangement going involving NATO and Russia, one, that will diffuse missile defense. It doesn't become then a problem issue that could undermine broader relations between the United States and Russia, or broader relations between NATO and Russia. Second, I think the calculation in NATO is that if you could have a cooperative system, it actually would allow for a better defense of Europe, because you get access, for example, to information from Russian radars and such. And the third point, and this actually, I've heard this from a couple of retired Russian generals, is they say, you know, if we are actually working with you in a cooperative defense, that's a game changer in terms of beginning to really affect the stereotypes in Moscow at how Russia looks at NATO. So NATO does see an advantage to this, and that's why there's, I think, such a consistent push to try to find a way to get into that cooperative arrangement.